The invisible ceiling there is a level you keep approaching and never crossing. It's not dramatic. There's no moment where you consciously decide to stop. You simply find yourself, again and again, arriving at the edge of something larger and pulling back. A better version of your life sits just beyond a line you cannot see, but somehow always feel. Most people blame circumstances. The timing was wrong. The opportunity wasn't right. But the pattern repeats across different circumstances, different years, different versions of the same attempt. Which means the ceiling is not external, it's installed. The ceiling is not made of circumstance. It's made of a psychological structure you constructed so early and so automatically that it now feels indistinguishable from your personality, like not wanting to become someone you wouldn't respect. Every brick in that ceiling was placed with what felt like a good reason. That's precisely why it holds. What Nietzsche saw in 1883, Nietzsche wrote something that took the world a century to process. He looked at educated, moral, sophisticated people and saw something disturbing. Not evil, not stupidity. He saw people who had systematically converted their limitations into virtues, their weakness into righteousness, their inability to accumulate power into a philosophical position that condemned power itself. He called it slave morality, and everyone misunderstood it. People thought Nietzsche was advocating for cruelty, for domination. He wasn't. He was describing a mechanism. Specifically, what happens inside a human being when they cannot express their full capacity and have no external means of changing that situation. The mechanism works like this. When you cannot achieve something power, recognition, influence, freedom, and have no immediate path to acquiring it, your mind does not simply accept the limitation. That would be psychologically intolerable. Instead, it reframes the limitation as a choice. It converts the inability into a moral position. It begins to see the thing it cannot have as something it wouldn't want even if it could. This is not conscious. This is the psyche protecting itself from the unbearable recognition of its own constraint. Modern psychology identified this mechanism decades later. They called it rationalization, cognitive dissonance reduction. But they missed what Nietzsche actually saw. Every time your mind converts an inability into a moral position, it does something irreversible to your internal architecture. It makes the ceiling, and once the ceiling becomes correct, approaching it no longer feels like ambition, it feels like transgression. This is why high-potential people experience a specific form of self-sabotage that doesn't feel like fear. It feels like conscience, like integrity, like humility. Nietzsche wasn't condemning those feelings. He was exposing their origin. Because feelings that originate in an inability to expand are not the same as feelings that originate in genuine values, even when they feel identical from the inside. The internalized herd, you don't follow the crowd. You've told yourself this many times. You think independently, and yet, there is a voice inside you that sounds nothing like a crowd and everything like your own careful reasoning, and it's the most effective herd mechanism ever devised. Not because it tells you what to think, but because it tells you what is safe to become. This is the internalized herd. The version of collective pressure that has been absorbed so completely, it no longer arrives from outside. It speaks in your own voice, uses your own logic, references your own values, and its primary function is not to make you think like everyone else. It's to make you want what everyone else can tolerate you having. Watch how this operates. You have an idea that is genuinely large. Something that would require you to occupy a different kind of space in the world. More visibility, more influence, more separation from the people currently around you. And something inside you immediately begins to moderate it, not to destroy it, to make it reasonable, to scale it to a size that feels proportionate. Proportionate not to your actual capacity, but to an unexamined internal standard, that moderation doesn't feel like the herd. It feels like wisdom, like not getting ahead of yourself. Nietzsche called this the most dangerous form of conformity because it requires no external enforcement. Once internalized, it self-administers. You become both the prisoner and the guard. The herd instinct at this level is about what you permit yourself to pursue with full commitment. Most people never commit fully to the largest version of what they're capable of becoming because full commitment would require them to temporarily occupy a space the internalized collective has not pre-approved. And temporary disapproval, even from a voice that exists entirely inside your own psychology, is experienced as genuinely threatening. Not metaphorically, neurologically. The brain processes anticipated social rejection through the same pain, pathways it uses for physical injury. This is why the herd instinct is so difficult to overcome through reasoning alone. You can construct a perfect rational argument for why you should pursue the larger version of your capacity, and still find yourself moderating, adjusting, scaling back not because the argument failed, but because the part of you that moderates doesn't operate through argument. It operates through a felt sense of what is appropriate. And that felt sense was installed long before you had the capacity to examine it. The will to power, truth. The will to power is the most misread concept in Western philosophy. In the popular version, it's about domination, about wanting to be above others. Nietzsche would have found this embarrassing. The will to power has almost nothing to do with other people. Nietzsche was describing the fundamental drive of every living organism not to maintain itself, but to become more than it currently is. To overcome the previous version of itself and move into a larger form. This is not metaphor. This is a precise claim about the deepest motivational structure of conscious life. Beneath every desire, beneath every goal, there is a single underlying drive. The drive toward more. Not more possessions, not more status, more capacity, more expression. Here's what's psychologically devastating. Nietzsche argued that this drive cannot be eliminated, cannot be suppressed indefinitely. Attempt to eliminate it and you don't produce a calmer, more peaceful person. You produce a person at war with their own nature. This is the misunderstanding that costs people everything. When the will to power is misidentified as something crude as the desire for, dominance people who consider themselves thoughtful and ethical immediately distance themselves from it. They construct an identity built around not wanting power, around genuineness, simplicity, service, humility, and in doing so, they don't eliminate the drive, they go to war with it. The drive continues. It has to. It's not optional. But now it operates in a psychology that has declared it illegitimate. So it finds other outlets. It leaks sideways. It emerges as resentment toward people who express it openly, as criticism dressed as ethics, as a subtle but persistent dissatisfaction that no amount of genuine virtue ever fully resolves. Because the thing producing the dissatisfaction is not a moral failing. It's a suppressed biological imperative. The will to power operating in a psychology that has rejected it doesn't disappear. It curdles. It transforms into something Nietzsche named with brutal precision, resentment. The moment power leaks, you're prepared for the obvious tests. The high-stakes conversation. The public failure. In those moments, you tend to show up. The leaking happens somewhere else entirely. It happens in the pause before you say what you actually think and then don't. It happens when you rewrite a message 4 times until it no longer sounds like you. It happens when someone makes a claim you know is wrong and you nod anyway because the social cost of disagreeing feels disproportionate. It happens when you're given an opportunity that is genuinely right for you and you spend 3 weeks thinking about it instead of moving. Each of these moments is small. Individually, none feel significant. but they share a precise psychological structure. Your actual response, the one that comes from the deepest layer of who you are, meets a filter. And the filter asks a question so quickly, you almost never notice it being asked. Is this safe to express? Not safe in the physical sense, safe in the social sense. Safe in the sense of not exceeding what your internalized standard of appropriate behavior permits. And in the fraction of a second between the genuine response and the filtered version, power leaks. This is what Nietzsche meant by not conscious compromises. The 1,000 daily moments where the genuine self presents itself and the conditioned self steps in front of it and offers something more acceptable instead. The filtered version is almost always reasonable, almost always justifiable, but it's not the real response. And somewhere beneath the explanation, you know it. This knowing accumulates. Every time the genuine response has a subtle but persistent sense of distance from yourself. Here's what makes this pattern particularly difficult to interrupt. Each filtered response doesn't just leak power in the moment. It reinforces the filter itself. Every time the conditioned self successfully intercepts the genuine response, the filter becomes slightly more automatic, slightly faster, slightly more invisible. Until the point, and this is the point most people reach without recognizing it, where the filter operates so quickly that the genuine response never fully forms. At that stage, it no longer feels like filtering. It feels like personality. You're not suppressing your real response. You've simply become someone whose real response is the filtered version. This is the most advanced form of the mechanism. Not the person who knows they're performing and wishes they weren't. The person who has performed so consistently and for so long that the performance has become indistinguishable from identity. Nietzsche's actual trick. Here's what Nietzsche actually discovered. The trick is not to overcome the ceiling through effort. The trick is to dissolve the belief that the ceiling is necessary. And that dissolution doesn't happen through motivation or discipline or strategy. It happens through a specific practice Nietzsche demonstrated in everything he wrote. He called it the revaluation of values. Not changing your values, examining where they came from. Most people never do this because it feels like questioning their own integrity. But here's the practice. Take any value you hold that limits your expansion. I don't want to be the kind of person who prioritizes ambition over relationships. Real fulfillment comes from simplicity, not achievement. Wanting too much is greedy. Ask 3 questions. Question 1. When did I adopt this value? Not philosophically, specifically. What was happening in my life when this became important to me? Most people discover their limiting values were adopted during periods of constraint, when expansion wasn't available, so the mind made non-expansion virtuous. Question 2. Does this value serve my actual capacity, or does it manage my inability to express? Because the honest answer reveals whether the value is genuine or defensive. Genuine values survive expansion. Defensive values require limitation to make sense. If you achieved everything you're capable of, would you still hold this value? If the answer is no, or if you're not sure, the value is protective, not principled. Question 3. Who benefits from me holding this value? This is where it gets brutal, because often, the people who benefit most from your limiting values are the people closest to you. The people who would be uncomfortable if you expanded beyond your current form. The people who prefer you at your current size because your growth would require them to examine their own ceilings. Nietzsche's trick is this. Once you see that a value is defensive rather than genuine, maintaining it becomes psychologically impossible. Not because you decide to abandon it, because it stops feeling like integrity and starts feeling like exactly what it is, a defense mechanism that has outlived its usefulness. This is not about becoming ruthless. This is not about abandoning ethics. This is about distinguishing between values that guide you and values that contain you. The person who operates without the ceiling is not less ethical. They simply stopped confusing limitation. This is the silent trick, not a strategy, not a method, not a hack. A recognition that happens at a level deeper than decision, where your identity actually lives beneath everything you've been told about who you are and what you deserve to become. The 7-day protocol, here's what you do starting today. Not tomorrow, today. Day 1 to 2. Identify the filter for 48 hours, track every moment. The pause before you speak, the rewrite before you send. The nod when you disagree, write them down, just observe. Don't judge. You're building awareness of the mechanism in real time. Day 3 to 4, name the ceiling, look at the pattern. What's the common thread? What version of yourself are you consistently refusing to become? More visible? More direct? More ambitious? More confrontational? More success? Complete that sentence with brutal honesty. That's your ceiling. Day 5 to 6. Examine the value, take the ceiling, and ask the 3 questions. When did I adopt this? Does it serve my capacity or manage my limitation? Who benefits from me staying here? Do not rush this. Sit with the discomfort. The answers will not arrive as insights. They'll arrive as a felt sense of recognition that something you give the genuine response, not the filtered version. Say what you actually think. Express what you actually want. Move when you actually want to move, not to be provocative. To experience what happens when the filter doesn't operate. Most people discover nothing bad happens. What happens is they feel more like themselves than they have in years. That feeling is not the goal. And psychological structures can be dissolved the moment you stop believing they're necessary. The only question, the ceiling was never outside you. The herd instinct was never around you. The will to power was never about domination. And the moment power leaked was never too small to matter. Nietzsche spent his entire life pointing at a single recognition, that most people spend their entire lives executing a program they never consciously chose. They call it personality. They call it who they are. It's none of those things. It's code written by circumstances that needed their compliance more than their flourishing. You've seen the mechanism now. What you do with that recognition is the only question that remains. You can close this video and return to the program. Most people will. The program is comfortable, familiar, socially approved. Or you can spend the next 7 days examining the structure, not to destroy it, to see it clearly enough that maintaining it becomes impossible. That choice right now, in this moment, is the only place power actually lives, not in the future, not in the perfect conditions. Not when you're ready. Now, the filter is running. The ceiling is holding. The internalized herd is speaking in your voice. The only question is, will you let it? If this video disturbed you in the way only true things disturb, if it reached something beneath the surface, then you already know what to do next. Subscribe, because what comes next goes deeper. Every video on this channel is built on the same premise, that the mechanisms governing human behavior are not mysterious. They are precise. They are learnable, and once seen, they cannot be unseen. The next video is already waiting.